Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Aditya here. So, we'll continue our comprehensive AWS course in that we started AWS API Gateway sessions, right? So, in this session, I am going to the hands-on part of AWS API Gateway. In the previous session, we have covered extensive features and integration types, endpoint types, and security features of AWS API Gateway. So, there I missed the hands-on part. So I want to cover that hands-on part. This is a sample hands-on part so that you can know how this AWS API Gateway works. Okay. So we'll explore each and every option here in a high level and see how can you create an REST API using AWS API Gateway. So for that, what I am going to do is I'm going to open my console. So I open my AWS console, and from this console, I'm going to open my API Gateway feature service. So once I open the API Gateway service, you can able to see this page. So this is API, Amazon API Gateway, and there is some caption here like create, maintain, and secure APIs at any scale. Okay, so here you have some description, right? Amazon API Gateway helps developers to create and manage APIs to backend systems running on Amazon EC2, AWS Lambda, or any publicly addressable web service. So with Amazon API Gateway, you can generate custom client SDKs for your APIs to connect your backend systems to mobile, web, and server applications or services. So regarding this theory part, we have already covered in the previous session. So this is the page, and right here we have different types of APIs. You can create a custom HTTP API, right, by using this option. Look, which was works with the help of Lambda and HTTP backends. Even you can do a WebSocket API. You know, right? Why? What is the use of WebSocket API for real-time use cases? Okay, for chart applications or dashboards, kind of things you can use this API type. And if you see here, these are also backed by Lambda, HTTP, and any AWS service and REST API. So this is what we're covering here in this session and in this API gateway course, right? But if you see here, this is a REST API, and we can develop a REST API, and those are backed by Lambda, HTTP, and even AWS services. And also we have REST API private. So as we discussed, we have a private API also, right? So create a REST API that is only accessible from within VPC. So you can use an VPC, or you can use this feature, this option, to build an REST API privately, and that could be hosted inside your VPC, and that can be only accessible for your other resources which are inside the VPC only. Okay, so here also the services which was backed here is Lambda, HTTP, and AWS services. Okay, so these are all API type options we have, and in this we are going to explore REST API. So click on this build here. So once you click on the build, right, this create REST API page will be opened, and where you need to provide the API details. So here, right, if you see, you have four options here. First one is new API. Here you are creating a new API, and if you have an existing API, you just use this option clone existing API and select the source API. So if you select this drop down, if you have any previously existing APIs, you can select that. Based on that, you can create a new API also. Okay, and you have import API option also. So if you have your API definition, right, in your local system, you can upload that definition. By using that definition, we can create an API also. Otherwise, the AWS itself is providing an example API for us. So this is a Swagger definition it is providing. So it is just for an pet store endpoint. So it will have some like slash pets kind of endpoints. You can able to get some response from this endpoints. So this much code it's provided for the example API. So if you want to try it out, you can try it out this example API also. But I'm going with a new API. Okay, I'm going with new API option. Now the next one is you need to provide the name to your APIs. So I will provide my API name is order API. Okay. and you can provide your description, which is optional, and also API endpoint type. So as we discussed, right, we have three types of API endpoints. One is regional, edge optimized, and private. And what is the use of regional APIs? Usually those are deployed under current AWS region. And edge optimized APIs route request to the nearest CloudFront point of presence, that is nothing but point of presence are nothing but edge locations. And private APIs are only accessible from VPC. So for this example or for this hands-on, I'm going to retain the regional endpoint only. And in the theory section, I said, right, edge optimized is by default ticked, but here in the new console, regional is going to be a default option. So you switch it back to the edge optimized version endpoint, or you can use the regional endpoint itself. So for this hands-on, we'll go with regional endpoint, and I'm going to create API by clicking here on create API. So once we clicked on this create API, we will get this page. So here it is saying successfully created REST API, that is order API. And right here, if you see this API related, you have so many options here: resources, stages, authorizations, gateway responses, models, resource policy, documentation, dashboard, API settings. So these many options are there. These and all we will cover in the future sessions, but as of now, just concentrate on this resources tab itself. Okay, in the resources tab, we have one resource called slash. So this is the starting point of our API slash. Okay, and you can able to create more number of resources under this API. So we'll start with slash resource itself. That is the starting point of our API. So whenever we call our API with slash, right, we need to perform some action. So for that, you need to create a method. So that is in this method section, and you can create n number of methods here. So we will see how to create those methods. So click on this create method, and this create method will open this page, that is create method page, where you need to do the method details first. So you need to select the method type. Since it's a API, you need to mention whether it's a get request, post request, or head, put, post. Even you can select any, right? So any request we can send to this particular method. But right, instead of not specifying a particular method type, it's better to specify some method type. So I am specifying get. So it's a get request. And after that, as we discussed in the theory part, we need to specify an integration type. Here you have lambda, so you can integrate with a lambda. Here you have HTTP, you can integrate with an existing HTTP endpoint itself. And there was one more option called mock, right? It will mock your response, so it's useful for testing your API. And also the AWS service, so you can integrate with an AWS service also. So you can select a specific region. In that region, you will get n number of AWS services, right, like batch, CloudFront, and so many options are there. Look, EC2 is there, and even lambda is there. Like that, you can select any AWS service and expose it as an API. And yeah, this and all the information you have to provide for selected resource. Even you have this API link, VPC link integration also. Okay, as of now, just since this is VPC link, right, if you create the resource in using this particular integration type, then there is no public internet access. So now for this example, we are going with the simple lambda function. It's a get method, and integration type is a simple lambda function. And here, right, we need to enable this lambda proxy integration also. So why we need to enable? Here itself it's provided the answer. Send the request to your lambda function as a structured event. So whatever request we are sending to a lambda function, it will store the information in the event in a proper structure. So if you didn't enable this, you need to configure your request properly to send the parameters. But if we turn on, it will take care of structuring our events. Okay, so that's why we need to enable this lambda proxy integration. And after that, you need to mention the actual lambda function. So now here, right, you can select different regions, and in the regions, right, where in any region, right, if you have your lambda in AP South 1 or AP South East 3 anywhere, right? You select that region and choose that lambda. So currently I don't have any lambdas created here, so that's why it's not showing anything. So now what I'm going to do is I will open the lambda and I will try to create a new function, and after that I will paste that ARN here. So go to the console and go to the lambda, and once the lambda console open, right, I'm going to create a new function. So order from scratch, and my function name is order first lambda. I will call it as orders first lambda. It is using the Node.js and architecture is same, so I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to create this function. Now this function is getting created. Okay, this lambda function is getting created. We'll wait for some time and it is loading. And yeah, so your first lambda function got created successfully. So you have your orders first lambda. And if you go to the code and check, right, here we have this response where we are sending back 200 status code, and also we are saying hello from lambda. So we'll change here, we'll say hello from orders first lambda. Okay, and also we'll do one thing, we'll print the event what we are getting here. So whenever the API gateway invokes this particular lambda, the backend, right, the backend is its, the lambda is its backend, we are printing what was the event that sent, and also we are checking the response, we are sending back to the response saying hello from orders first lambda. Okay, so our lambda is ready, and we'll test this lambda by creating a test event also. So I'm just creating a test event and I'm gonna test this, and you can see, right, you are getting some error because print is not defined. Okay, I think there is a spelling mistake. Oh sorry, this is Node.js, right? Print is not defined, so I need to type console.log. Okay, and I'm deploying again. So I am in a thought of Python programming, but it's in Node.js, so I need to test again. So once I test again, you can able to see I'm getting the response properly, and even we are printing the event like this: key 1 value 1, key 2 value 2, key 3 value 3. Okay, good, right? Our lambda function is working fine. Now come to the lambda function overview, and here, right, you can copy the function ARN. Just copy it and go back to our API gateway, and here, right, where we need to select the lambda function, just paste your ARN. So here now new lambda get populated because you have created a lambda. So I'm selecting it. So once you selected your lambda, right, and below you have this option called default timeout. The default timeout is 29 seconds. So the API gateway itself have some timeout. So it won't allow any requests to take more than 29 seconds. So there was a restriction here. So even the lambda executes for 15 minutes, but the API gateway will only wait for 29 seconds. And if we turn off this, right, we need to provide custom timeout. But if you observe this, this custom timeout also should be between 50 to 29,000 milliseconds. That 29,000 milliseconds is the maximum value. That is nothing but the 29 seconds only. So 29,000 milliseconds is equivalent to 29 seconds. So why we need to add custom timeout, right? 29 seconds is enough. So I'm going to turn it on. And below you can able to see, right, the method request settings. So you can do authorization, you can do request validation, and even you can give some operation name, and you can send, right, string parameters, query string parameters, request headers, and you can provide the request body model also. So this and all we will cover in the future sessions in detail, but in this session I'm not going to touch anything here. I just specify the lambda and finally creating the method. Okay, so the method is getting created, and if you see under slash get method got created, and just observe this resource, right, just observe this slash get methods configuration here. We have a client can able to send request, so we call it as method request. And if you see the method request, you can add the authorization also and the API key, and even so many details you can add, right? You can add the request paths, URL, query string parameters, HTTP, request headers, and even request body model also you can define in this method request. After that, it is going to integration request. So if you see, the integration type is lambda, right? And the proxy we set to true and timeout 29 seconds, and you can specify the URL path parameters, URL query string parameters, HTTP address. And after that, right, it will go to our lambda function. So this is the lambda. So our orders first lambda. And once the lambda process the request, it will send back response to first integration response. So what this integration response will do is, since it's a proxy integration, whatever value we send, it will convert in a structured event and send back to us. Similarly, the integration request also. So whatever request we send to the method, that will go to the integration request, and integration request will form it as an structured event and send to the lambda. Okay. Finally, the method response. So here we said only response 200. You can specify the response headers, response body type. So here we simply said we need application slash JSON. That's it. So this and all you can modify in the future sessions, but here we are keeping as is, but I'm explaining what are the types of requests and responses here and how the flow works. Okay. So here we got created slash for our API, that is the starting point of our API, and it has a get method. Now we'll test this resource. So to test this resource, you have to go to here in the same method execution section, you have test. So if you go to this test, right, here you can pass your query strings, your headers and all for testing. And after that, you can click on test. Since we don't have any query strings and headers required, so I'm directly clicking on test. So if you see here, we access the slash resource from this API, and we got hello from orders first lambda. Okay, these are the response headers we are getting from the lambda, but yeah, you can ignore that. So we are getting the response body as we expected, and status is 200. Okay, now we are good, right? Now you want to create one more resource, right? Here you have only slash, but you want to create one more resource called orders. So under slash, you are creating slash orders, and I'm creating that resource. So yeah, it is asking some feedback. As of now, I'm not giving anything. So orders. So inside our initial slash, right? Initial slash, we have another initial resource. We have another resource we created orders. So we have an order resource. For orders also, we have to create one method, right? For any resource, you need to create methods. So I need to create a method. So in the same resource details, we have slash. Here the path is slash orders, but previously the path is slash only. So this is the starting point. This is the orders API or endpoint. So here you can able to create one more method by clicking here create method. So if you click here in the create method, again the same steps, right? You need to select the method type. Again I'm selecting the get, and same lambda integration. I'm enabling the lambda proxy integration, and here I need to mention an lambda function, no? So that's why I'm going back to my lambda, and I'm going to create one more function called orders second lambda. Okay, and create function. So this will create one more new lambda. Now we are going to integrate the second resource with this new lambda. Okay, so it is loading. We'll wait a minute and it got completed. Okay, so here also we are going to change the code a little bit. First, we are going to print the sorry, it's Node.js code. We need to console log this event, and right here I'm going to change hello from order second lambda, and I'm deploying this changes, and we'll do a test event also. We'll test it and test, and you can able to see that hello from orders sec lambda, the status code is 200. Now we are good with this lambda, the second lambda function. Now copy the function ARN, right? The lambda function ARN, come back to the API gateway, and in the API gateway, right, paste your lambda URL. So look, our we have two options. One is the first lambda, second lambda. So I'm selecting the second lambda for this slash orders. and I'm not going to add any method request, URL, query string parameters, HTTP request headers and response body here. I'm just directly creating the method. So the method is getting created now. Okay, we'll wait for a second, and yeah, the method got created under the slash orders, that is get method. So here the same way, right? The client will send to method request and integration request. Lambda will process it. What is the lambda? Order second lambda and send back to the response, and the response will be sent back to the client. Okay. So now we will test this one, this endpoint slash orders. So go to test tab, and here we don't need to specify core strings and headers because we don't need in our endpoint as of now, right now. So just click on test, and here you see, right, it is hitting the slash orders, and we are getting the 200 as status, and the response body, if you observe, hello from orders second lambda. Fascinating, right? You have created an API just like that. It is very simple. But you may wonder why you are testing from this API gateway test tab, right? I want it to access as a real URL, right? I want an HTTP URL endpoint, and I want to see that. So we can do that. So for that, right, you have already good with your setup. So you have your main resource and also you have order resource, both will integrated with some other lambda functions. Okay, now in order to expose this API as an public API, you need to deploy the API. So here in the above, you will have an option called deploy API. Okay, so if you click on this deploy API, you will get this page. So here, right, you have to select the stage. So if you don't have any stages, you have to select new stage. And so here stages is nothing but dev environment, dev stage, prod stage, testing stage, right? QA stage, like that you can create your own stages. So as of now, I'm creating a stage called dev. And if I have this dev stage, right, you can add some description whether it's only for development something, and finally you can deploy your API. So this is deploying my API. Okay, now you got an HTTPS URL. See, so in this stage, right, now from resources to you went to stages. So in this stage, dev stage, right, you have an invoke URL that is HTTPS. That means it's a secured URL with a custom domain, with a domain which was provided by the AWS ending with slash dev. So this is your URL. So in this URL, whenever you access slash dev slash, then you will hit this get method. And if you access slash orders, you will hit this slash orders get method, right? So we'll test now. First we'll check with the dev itself. So I'm copying this URL and we'll paste in the browser and we'll see how it responds. So it is hitting the first lambda because this is slash only. So if you say slash, it will hit only the first lambda. So if I say slash orders, so it has to hit the second lambda. So if you see here, it is hitting the, or it is invoking the second lambda. Fascinating, right? You just created two lambdas, you just created two endpoints, and you expose it as an API just like that, REST API just like that, within a few minutes, right? So this is how powerful this much powerful is this API gateway, and by using API gateway, you can do more, right? Even we have other edges, gateway responses, and all. We have explored a tip in the iceberg. Okay, so this is the basic hands-on part of the AWS API Gateway. I hope you understand the concept. And if you like this, like, share, and subscribe. And let me know in the comments if you want to learn further more topics. Thanks for watching my videos. Bye.